Okay, now we're going to get into some passages from Living Wisdom that I felt resonated with this issue. Okay, the page numbers are generally somewhere within a quote. Page 143, Living Wisdom. Anthony, one of the feelings that arises when insight occurs is an utmost friendliness. PB uses the word beneficence, but this friendliness is always there. You're at home. In fact, they call it home. One of the, this is my comment here. One of the surprising things, and the first to reveal itself in a near-death experience, a glimpse or samadhi, is that the universe or God or the overself is nice. It's painless. It's healing. It's got your best interests at heart. The plan is in place, all for your benefit. Life here on earth in separation has a built-in anxiety. Watch your back. Every hello is a goodbye. Your friend today may be your enemy tomorrow. Better keep the boss happy and not lose your job while you be out on the street. Pay your taxes or go to jail, etc., etc. The most prominent characteristic of the higher reality seems to be compassion, love, intimacy, benevolence, and with Plotinus goodness, heart wisdom. It's all good with no bad. The memory of this, or perhaps the dimly apprehended future possibility of this, is a major conscious or unconscious motive in our lives. I should say our spiritual lives. Next, I want to move on to number 7, paragraph number 7. Nice one. If you've ever entered into the glimpse and there is a very strong thought that you are holding at the time, that too might color the glimpse. J.A. Anthony, you said earlier that the sage, and I assume when he talks about the philosopher, he's referring to the sage, transcends both the I am consciousness and the world idea. Anthony, yes. By that I mean not so much transcending or above, but as including both within oneself. A person like that would know what their role is in the world and work with the world idea. So this person understands something about the nature of the world idea and the direction it's heading, and also knows the nature of their own soul. That person we can call a philosopher. Most prominent idea, this is my comment, the most prominent idea coloring the glimpse is that you're having or have had that experience. Then the glimpse appears to be mine, coming back and reaffirming the existence of the egoic subject. With the oneness samadhi, I could see my personality, persona, as like a speck in a vast field. This is also one of God's or nature's creations and just as valid as any other. Waves in the ocean, both coexisting. To be of use to the world mind and not get flated or get into excesses, I think one has to maintain the flavor of that smallness and secondariness to the oneness or God's will. Most teachers tend to downgrade the importance of glimpses, including Anthony and PB. For me, glimpses have been my primary teachers since an experience is worth more than several hundred books and lectures. A taste is worth 1,000 descriptions. And now we're going to move along into quote number 9. Number 9. Now, to understand that the world is a series of ideas, or that it is mental, you must first have the experience of nirvikalpa samadhi. Here the world idea temporarily disappears from your consciousness. Then when that world idea has returned to consciousness, you see that the world idea arises within consciousness and is the result of consciousness. If these two are combined, the person has a feeling of philosophy's completeness. My comment. You could question, how can oneness contain things like the panorama of existence? Wouldn't that be a one-many? No, because there is no substance to the image, therefore no particularity. Just as in a movie, the images are light and made out of light, not different from light. In the case of oneness, adds a feeling of benevolence that is all pervasive for sentient beings. All sentient beings, which means bugs too. And the next one is 11. Mystical literature explains that these three levels which are taking place within mysticism can be correlated in some way or other with the three primal hypostases. But that is a misunderstanding of their own experiences. For that, we have to go to the quotations where P.B. speaks about the fallacy of divine identity. When the mystic speaks about unity or divine identity or divine union, what they're speaking about, if they're not deluded, if they're not just referring to a mental or a conceptual level, is something that is taking place in their own soul and not within the one itself. There could be no union with the highest, with the one itself. My comment. I noticed when watching Swami Sarvapriyananda's teachings on YouTube that they, the Vedantins, kind of make the same error. And PB lived and associated with this group during the hidden teaching development. So I kind of think the criticism was aimed at them. I've been reading through Anthony's classes on the one, and he and Plotania say you can have a revelation or insight into the one, and the soul becomes the faculty that perceives that vision. Oneness samadhi is a state of consciousness where soul can get a glimpse of the one and or world mind, world idea. What did we used to call it? Substance and function. The soul's version of the double act. The substance nature of the soul is freedom, returning home, who I really am, the goal of the mystical quest, the salvation of man, etc. It's as good as it gets. This is an aspect of, let's say, the Godhead. To me, this is the God of Christianity. This is what Jesus was preaching. It's all good, redeeming the purpose of one's life, etc. As Elvis Costello saying, what's so funny about love, peace, and understanding? Another aspect of the Godhead is the world mind, world idea. The world idea, God, is not so nice, since it works with pairs of opposites in its manifesting act. To me, this is the God of Judaism. It's interesting that in the times of Jesus in Israel and the Roman occupation, esoteric Judaism worshipped the vision of the Merkaba, Ezekiel's vision. In those ancient days, revelation was the scientific knowledge. This cosmic vision was adapted to the culture of that era. Another aspect of the Godhead is the one, mind in itself. They are PB's Trinity. And here's a painting of the Merkaba by Raphael. Those are cherubim. And here is a video I found on YouTube. That's an accurate portrayal of Ezekiel. I guess I could add that the vision of Ezekiel is often used on shows like Ancient Aliens as an example of a UFO. If you read about flying machines in the ancient Vedas, they are made with gyroscopes, a wheel within a wheel. They're called vimanas. Supposedly, a 5,000-year-old ancient Indian vimana was found in an Afghanistan cave. And 8 American soldiers went in after it and got stuck in a time well and disappeared in the attempt to remove it. Here's a link to the article. And I think one more, we could do this one. Anthony. The initiatory phase would be the recognition that one has a soul. The second would be to realize the need to carry out an ascetic or purgative regime. The third would be unitive, where one achieves union with one's own soul. For mystical literature to go beyond that, I think, is misleading. The philosopher points out that this is all taking place within one's own soul, that the identity that is achieved is with one's own soul, and that is one's God. So here Anthony affirms the two realizations, who am I and oneness. I don't know if ascetic disciplines help, maybe to prove depth of commitment. Usually these two realizations happen one right after the other. Looking over Anthony's classes on the one, he says that the one cannot be known per se, but it can be known by revelation. A vision that utilizes the soul is the organ of knowledge, substance and function. On the other hand, if the cosmic vision takes place, it is not totally one's own soul. We have to bring in the idea of a drop of water in the ocean, and the ocean in a drop of water. There is a correspondence between what is revealed within the soul and the aspects of the Godhead. The vision portrays some truth about the structure of the world mind, world idea. What is the difference between God and Godhead? Meister Eckhart calls Godhead the origin of all things that is beyond God. God conceives as a creator. God and the Godhead are as distinct as heaven and earth. Another passage from Living Wisdom. RC, does the recognition of that correspond with these two samadhis that we're speaking of? Is Nirvikalpa a recognition of oneness? Anthony, no. In Nirvikalpa, you're not required to go through the metaphysical discipline. You can meet mystics of extraordinary attainment who've achieved Nirvikalpa and have no understanding of the cosmology that has been worked out, whether here or in Plotinus or any of that. Don't make the assumption that because a mystic has achieved Nirvikalpa, that mystic is going to understand what we're saying here. My comment. This agrees with enlightenment number one, the answer to who am I? In many cases, there is no change of character, no special knowledge in the realizer. The chief characteristics acquired are usually fearlessness, no fear of death, and a sense of complete freedom. There is another way to get at this sense of Nirvikalpa. You can have it pointed out directly that you are emptiness right now. The mind can't grasp it, but it can be pointed out like physically. It's like we imagine
we are a three-dimensional being that was born, drives a car, brushes their teeth, gets married, lives in space and time, has children. This is a mental projection. But see that you are a two-dimensional being, an empty, knowing, unchanging consciousness, and the flow of experience in the field of perception, laminated together. There is no third party, no relationship between the two. The living person is like an interface between everything and nothing. Imaginative thinking hasn't gotten in yet and started separation, making name and form, constructing time and space, constructing a virtual reality overlay on life. Another paragraph. Anthony, well, wouldn't you have to start with the body? Isn't it going to be the body that is going to provide you with the various kinds of consciousness that will give you an insight into the world idea? You have to become an inhabitant of a body and get to know about wakeful consciousness. As an inhabitant of the dream life, you become aware of Taijasa consciousness. The deeper laws will take you into prajna consciousness. In other words, it is the world idea which provides you with the necessary vehicles by which the soul, which you experience nirvikalpa, knows that it can understand the depths, or let's say the dimensions, of the various levels of being that are in the world idea. This is interesting, my comment here. This is interesting because how Anthony is characterizing the world idea parallels the states of consciousness mentioned in the Mandukya Upanishad, waking, dream, and deep sleep. This was new to me. I hadn't thought of the world idea this way. So I would say that the world as a holographic appearance corresponds with the cosmic dream, Tajasa, and the world as planes and vectors of light correspond to the prajna or causal level of the world idea. Moving right along here. From the book, it's a whole different ball game. When you want to become a philosophic mystic, you have to take that consciousness that is capable of introverting into itself and use it for the serpent's path exercise so that you can achieve the sahaja, which is understanding that the world idea is mind, manifesting itself, and that the appearance and the reality are coterminous or the same thing. My comment. I just read this book of the Hidden Gospel of Thomas, commentaries on the non-dual sayings of Jesus, and in this is the teaching of heaven on earth, saying 113. His disciples said to him, "The kingdom, on what day will it come?" Jesus says, it will not come by watching and waiting for it. They will not say, "Look here," or "Look there." Rather, the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and people do not see it. I asked this non-dual teacher, Francis Lucille, about the gap in the Serpent's Path exercise. He said something like, that's when you get a really great idea. So to me, this meant that experiencing that gap is more familiar than it first appears. The non-dualists say that the gap need not be accessed in deep meditation or yoga trance. Since it's between two thoughts and you are always thinking, it's right here. It's just not interesting to the mind, so it ignores the gap like a caterpillar going from leaf to leaf. And the next paragraph. Next paragraph. And PB tries to make clear that the Sahaja state is a superior state because there you reach the point where you recognize that reality and appearance are really only distinction that the ego makes, not that the insight permits, and your understanding then becomes more accurate. You know how Arnold, Sir Edwin Arnold, the Light of Asia, tries to describe it. He says the dewdrop slips into the shining sea. Truly, it is the other way around. The ocean is slipping into the dewdrop, and that would be a way of trying to understand how the individual soul absorbs the world idea. But these are metaphors. They're all bunk. If you ever get enlightened, you're going to come and shoot me for lying. My comment. Through experience, the conceptual mind is putting together a model of the world idea. You are trying to make a good or accurate conceptual model, which is corrected or contradicted by experience. The world and your conceptual representation are constantly rubbing against each other. In Zen, what is called acting out of no mind is spontaneously acting out of the non-dual mind. On page 84 of his 1979 book, Zen in the Martial Arts, Joe Hames claimed that Bruce Lee read the following quote to him, attributed to the legendary Zen master Taekwondo Soho. The mind must always be in a state of flowing, for when it stops anywhere, that means the flow is interrupted, and that it is this interruption that is injurious to the well-being of the mind. In the case of the swordsman, it means death. When the swordsman stands against his opponent, he is not to think of the opponent, nor of himself, nor of his enemy's sword movements. He just stands there with his sword which, forgetful of all technique, is already
only to follow the dictates of the subconscious. The man has effaced himself as the wielder of the sword. When he strikes, it is not the man, but the sword in the hand of the man's subconscious that strikes. And the last one I think I'm going to do is 31. It is necessary to give certain terms, often but wrongly used interchangeably, and hence confusedly, a sharper definition. The saint has successfully carried out ascetic disciplines and purificatory regimes for devotional purposes. The prophet has listened for God's voice, heard and communicated God's message of prediction, warning, or counsel. The mystic has intimately experienced God's presence while inwardly wrapped in contemplation, or has seen a vision of God's cosmogony, while in concentrated meditation. The sage has attained the same results as all these three, has added a knowledge of infinite and eternal reality thereto, and has brought the whole into a balanced union. The philosopher is a sage who has also engaged in the spiritual education of others. Anthony, a sage has unbroken, continuous awareness of the self as absolute. That's what a sage is, to PB.
I would like to show a clip from the movie Zen and the Art of Compassion with the teacher Amasami.
Zen, there's a beautiful method, a teacher-student relationship, and also down to earth and mystical and humorous, all those things Zen has. Christianity too has strengths, so I should not neglect Christianity. It is also strengths, sort of, let us say, more what you call, how shall I put it, something like divine embrace or ambience and interpersonal relations and love. All those, they are not on focus in Zen. So that is nice. Actually, I met in my training days one Rensei Zen master. I went with a Japanese sister to see him, actually in Matsushima. This is a famous place. And he made a deep bow to the sister and he said, sisters, Christians, as Christians, we had great compassion. We send people, we talk about compassion, we don't have the practice. And we have enlightenment, but as Christians, you don't have enlightenment. So compassion and enlightenment, if we can combine, it will be great, he said. Yeah. Zen awakening, it's very important for me. See, Zen awakening, it's not an experience, but it's experiential. Sort of realization of emptiness. Let me say we are on two levels broadly. There's a phenomenal level, that's body, mind, emotions, rather bounded and with boundaries and concrete. The other side is consciousness, spirit. It is sort of boundlessly open. And in that sense, the world is in you in a sense. You see, the world enters you all the time. You are an openness. And awakening is to be grounded in this openness and in this boundlessness. See, of course, you are also moving in the concrete level, but basically be aware, be grounded in the sort of boundless openness. That is awakening. Yeah.
So I love this quote where PB defines different types of spiritually advanced individuals and what characteristics they have and what is the final goal? Simply peace and emptiness. And in conclusion, read this quote. At an earlier stage of the journey to spiritual maturity, the freedom of the soul may be felt as a possibility of detachment from the ongoing world idea. This freedom inheres in the inviolable nature of consciousness, which is imagined to have put itself in association with the system of nature, the ongoing karmic continuity of the universe. A deeper exploration of this consciousness in relation to divine mind reveals the same mind to be the source of the world idea. An entirely different order of freedom results from the realization that the whole world is a manifestation of one's own very being, not something imposed from or by an alien source. Freedom is not only detachment from the ongoing circuit of life's evolution, but the cosmic circuit is seen as a free expression or emanation of one's own essence. Therefore, there is no longer a dualism of purpose. One consents to and expresses the world idea because it is inseparable from the law of one's own self. My comment. I can only relate this to my own experience. The cosmic vision, how manifestation is projected from the deeper mind, occurred within the unity consciousness, oneness. In a way, it's the reverse of the answer to who am I? I am a formless essence free from the world. This unity samadhi says the reverse. I am the world and its stream of ever-flowing events and complex relationships. The who am I correctly grasped leads to bliss, freedom, safety, the all good. The world mind, on the other hand, works with opposites: pleasure, pain, creation, destruction, justice, injustice, etc. And you, the person, with all its errors, suffering, and stupidity, is back as a speck within the unity. Although unity consciousness is a trance and free from suffering and the world appearance, it's great, full of friendships and synchronicities. Although unity consciousness is a trance and free from suffering and the world appearance, it's great, full of friendships and synchronicities. Eventually, the ego, with its chronic issues, makes its appearance again. Unity, God consciousness, is not a permanent state either. From what I understand, not every realized person gets a job from the world mind. If you do, you may arise to name and fame, and the proper way to deal with ego inflation is to remember that you are a speck in the vastness. You wouldn't normally think of the Grateful Dead as being holy messengers from God, but if you have been to their concerts high on LSD maybe, one can't avoid the positive feeling of community, beauty, and oneness. So to a certain degree, I think the band owes its name and fame to getting a job with the world mind and expressing and bringing it into manifestation a few defined qualities like community, feeling of sympathetic joy, kindness, goodwill, etc. Well, thanks very much for listening to my paper. I'm going to sign off now.